Glad you made it. What's this thing with a tie, Mike? Yeah, but NPR has to wear a tie. Okay, well, thank you all for being here. We just had a great welcome from the governor of the great state of Maryland, Martin O'Malley, and we had a wonderful presentation by a couple of economists who talked to us about building an economy that works for all Americans. That's what we're here to do for the next 2.5 days, is talk about how we reward work, how we provide economic security to all Americans, how we make sure that the economy of tomorrow works for everyone. Not just some, but for everyone. How we return to those days when we really could say to our children, the American dream is before you. Quite honestly, these last 2 days have been pretty good days for Americans. Yesterday, we maintained the full faith and credit of the United States of America and did not cause American families' mortgage interest rates to go way up. We made sure that people could still borrow at a decent rate. Today, hundreds of thousands of Americans woke up hearing the president tell them you're getting a raise to $10.10 an hour if you were working at minimum wage. And so I think we're ready to work. And we want to get out there and do the things that show Americans that we're ready to take action, that we're ready to work on their behalf. This should be a year of action. There is no reason why 2014 should be a year of shutdown politics, or why we just pack up and put it away and say there's no more that we can do. We can do things like raise that minimum wage, not just for workers, for federal contractors, but for all Americans. We can guarantee equal pay for equal work. We can renew emergency unemployment insurance for 1.7 million Americans, and we can finally fix a badly broken immigration system. We know on the immigration reform front that we have the votes today to pass that bill, and we believe we have the votes today to pass all those initiatives I just mentioned. And so that's why we think this should be a year of work, a year of action, and that's why we're here assembled in Maryland to talk about how we as Democrats will work with the president for this year of action on behalf of the American public. And with that, let me turn now to the leader, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To you and to Mr. Crowley, thank you for providing the auspices for which we can come together to work for an economy that works for all Americans. We heard from some experts, some economists today. We are in a lively exchange of ideas. And one of the ideas that emerges in all that we hear is that when women succeed, America succeeds. The reinforcement of that principle is one that, again, the president reinforced by raising guaranteeing a minimum wage to people who work for contractors with the federal government. But in our agenda of when women succeed, America succeeds, as the president said, and men do too. It's about pay equity and raising the minimum wage. It's about paid sick leave. It's about children learning, parents earning with quality, affordable child care. Really important. And also, we come a day after the House of Representatives lifted the debt ceiling. Can you imagine? Now, let me just read from the Constitution. The 14th Amendment declares that the validity of the public debt of the United States of America authorized by law shall not be questioned. The action that we took yesterday reinforces that, honors that statement in the Constitution. It's really stunning that 199 Republicans voted to default on the full faith and credit of the United States of America. That is not in furtherance of an economy that works for all Americans. In fact, it doesn't work for America at all, whether it's our global standing or whether it is what is happening at kitchen tables across the country. As Mr. Becerra said, our chairman said, what interest people will pay on their car loans, their mortgage payment, college loans, small business loans, should they be small business people, what it means to people's 401ks with the impact of a default on the full faith and credit of the United States of America. So putting all of this with a oneness of confidence, confidence in our economy that wants to share prosperity for all Americans, confidence in an economy, again, that works for all Americans. We're very excited about the enthusiasm of our members. We're hopeful that with the cooperation between Democrats and Republicans yesterday on the floor, grateful to the Speaker for bringing up the legislation. He knows the consequences of a default, but yet 199 of his colleagues did not share that concern. Stunning. And that I think no senator voted. No Republican senator, thank you, Steve. No Republican senator voted to lift the debt ceiling. Every one of them voting to default on the full faith and credit of the United States of America. It's really important that the public understand what is at stake in these debates. Today is President Lincoln's birthday. February 12th is when we used to always celebrate it. Now it's a whole weekend and a week and the rest. February 12th, President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. The public has to know how they are affected by public policy in Washington, D.C. They want America to have a raise. America deserves a raise. The work ethic is alive and well across our country. We're hearing from economists how creativity thrives across America, and that is what creates jobs for an economy that works for all Americans. So we're very excited about a year of action, working with the President, hopefully working in a bipartisan way. And in that spirit, I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished Democratic whip of the House, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer.
Well, thank you, Madam Leader. Chris Van Hollen and I are very, very pleased to have all of you here, all of our colleagues here to Maryland. And we were very proud of our governor this evening as he spoke to our caucus. And he focused on the issues that the President focused on. And he focused on it first in an optimistic way. Our President just a few weeks ago said he was optimistic that we had done better, but we were not where we needed to be. We still needed to invest in growing our economy and giving opportunity to our people. He said that he wanted to work together with the Congress of the United States. And I would suggest to you that every time that we have had a bipartisan vote, America has been advantaged. Whether it was paying our bills, as we did yesterday, unfortunately not in a bipartisan way in the United States Senate, but not a great bipartisan vote, but a bipartisan vote. When we funded government, when we passed the omnibus appropriation bill and replaced the devastatingly negative sequestration under the leadership of Chris Van Hollen. So acting in a bipartisan fashion is a good thing for the country. But the President said we need to act. Action. The American public did not send us to the Congress of the United States not to do the public's business, not to invest in growing their economy, not to vote to make sure they get paid a wage that they can live on, not to allow them to fall through the cracks because we don't increase the unemployment insurance rate, not to not help the economy by passing comprehensive immigration reform that I know others are going to speak about. And while I'm optimistic that when we act together, America will succeed, women will do better, all of us will do better. And we will, in the phrase that I've used so often, make it in America. That's what Americans want to do. That's what young people want to do. They want to have a sense that they can make it in America. That's why people came to America, to make it, to seize the opportunity that is the American dream. And while I'm optimistic, I am concerned when Mr. Hulskamp says, quote, "That's what our leadership said. If we get past this one," referring to the extension of the debt limit so America would pay its bills, "we're done until the election." Let us hope that's not true. Let us hope that the Republicans want to work with the President and with us to make sure that we can make it in America, that women do better and America will do better, that we invest in our people, and grow our economy so that everybody can make it in America. Now let me yield to my dear colleague and friend, the Assistant Leader, Mr. Jim Clyburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer, Madam Leader, and colleagues. I think that all of us have been buoyed today by the actions of the President establishing a minimum wage for federal contractors. That minimum wage, that executive order, I think, is something that extends in areas that we have not touched on in one instance for about 20 years. It's been 20 years since we've established a floor for the people who earned their base salaries from tips. That was established at $2.13 20 years ago, and it's been that way ever since. This executive order raises that floor to $4.90, and it covers concessions and service contracts as well, which means that these concession stands that we see in state government, where we have people blind and disabled who do certain services for the state government under contract with the federal government, that service is covered as well. Now we believe it's time for us as a Congress to pass the Hawken-Miller bill. It would immediately lift 4.6 million Americans above the poverty level. That's what that legislation would do. And I think that it's high time that we do that. Because, as is often said, over 60% of the people who will benefit from the minimum wage are women. And 1 in 4 have children. And so, and I think it's important for us to look at one other thing. We hear all this talk about minimum wage as it relates to youth, young workers. The fact of the matter is the average age of minimum wage employees is 35 years old, and with at least one child. So this is all about lifting households, lifting women, lifting children above the poverty level, and I would hope that the Congress, our Republican friends, would join us in passing the Hawken-Miller bill, raising the minimum wage over the next 2 years. With that, I'd like to yield to the Vice Chair of our caucus, Congressman Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Jim. An economy that works for everyone. That's what we all strive for. That's what our Democratic caucus is striving for as well. And we're pleased of the actions that the President took today in terms of increasing the minimum wage for federal contract workers. We're also pleased that the Congress has acted as well as it pertains to the debt limit. There are things that we should be happy about, and we are happy about them. We also hope that this is a watershed moment, that more will come from this, although I'm not holding my breath. There are 1.7+ million Americans today who find themselves economically stranded. They're on an island surrounded by economic debt, desperately searching for a job, and have now been denied an extension of unemployment insurance. And what that really means to these individuals is that as they continue to look for work to provide for their families, their education, their food, their medicine, their rent, their mortgage, their government is not there because the Republican caucus refuses to extend unemployment insurance for these individuals and their families. I have a gentleman from New York who has contacted me asking, is there any way we could see forward a bill this week before we broke for our district work period? And I had to tell him I didn't think it was likely after the Senate was unable to pass it. It's very difficult to tell someone who's so desperate in in fact, looking at the prospects of losing his home and what that means to a family, how devastating that is to a family. My Republican colleagues who often talk about how pro-family they are. Well, here's an opportunity to send a message to 1.8 million Americans, not Democrats, not Republicans, not red, blue, green, whatever color, just Americans who are desperately trying to make ends meet. Send a message, give these people hope that their country believes in them as much as they believe in this country. Give them hope and give them the opportunity to take care of their families, a modicum, not everything, but just something to help make ends meet and pass unemployment insurance extension. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our point person on the Budget Committee and a Marylander as well, Chris Van Holland.
Thank you, Joe, and I want to join with Steny Hoyer and all my colleagues in welcoming you to Maryland. And as the leaders and others have said, we've gotten off to a great start. We're focused on what specific actions we can take to make sure the economy works for all Americans. And that was the subject of the discussion we just had with a number of economists. And certainly if we want the economy to work for everybody, we've got to reform our broken tax code. Because right now we have a tax code that in too many places is rigged to help very powerful special interests and folks at the very high end of the income scale at the expense of the rest of the country. And a case in point are the provisions in the tax code that actually encourage big corporations to ship American jobs overseas. We want to ship American products overseas, not American jobs overseas. And other provisions in the tax code that encourage big corporations to move their profits to tax shelters overseas, rather than having those funds invested here in America and in American jobs. So we're going to continue to push, as the President outlined in his State of the Union address, for a tax code that works for everybody, not just for powerful special interests, that makes sure that we encourage investment here in the United States in all sorts of innovation and modernize our infrastructure, because that will help put more Americans back to work in good-paying jobs. And we hope our Republican colleagues will join us in that effort. And now I want to turn it over to Steve Israel, a good friend who's focused every day on trying to make sure that we build an economy that works for everybody. Steve Israel.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. What you've heard from my colleagues, rising wages, pay equity for women, a fair tax code, immigration reform, these are not just topics, these are the fundamental differences in the United States Congress right now between Democrats and Republicans. This is about whose side are you on? And on every one of those issues, rising wages, pay equity, immigration reform, a fair tax code, we're on the side of the American people. We're going to continue to focus on this dominant theme. Whose side are you on? At this conference, over the next 9 months, as we focused on this in the past. In California today, I will add, one of our colleagues, Gary G. Miller, the most vulnerable Republican in Congress, decided that he was on the wrong side and jumped ship, because he himself knows that you cannot continue to defend the indefensible, you cannot continue to defend the wrong priorities and the wrong values in front of the American people. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Your opposition statement today, with a summary of your remarks to labor, shows that you oppose President Obama's latest trade initiative. What do you oppose, and what do you expect to hear from him on Friday?
Well, I don't know. I think the characterization that you're saying of the statement we weren't talking about President Obama's trade initiative. We were talking about Camp Baucus. And I said then that Camp Baucus in its present form is unacceptable to me. And I have worked with many of our colleagues to try to find some common ground, but in its present form, it is unacceptable. That is not, as you suggested, a rejection of the president's trade agenda. It's a rejection of the current form of the Camp Caucus. But the trade issue is a very important one because we're the party of John F. Kennedy, a party of free trade, fair trade. And we believe that the global economy is here to stay, and we're part of it. But as Mr. Van Hollen said, we want to export product overseas, not transport jobs overseas. And we have a tax code right now that rewards businesses that send jobs overseas. That has to be reversed to reward businesses that create jobs in the United States. It's all very much a part of an economy that works for all Americans. And I just want to add to something that my colleagues were saying. When Mr. Israel was talking about the difference between Democrats and Republicans, we see in what the president said in his speech. He talked about an opportunity agenda. We have long seen an opportunity gap in our country, and we have to do what we can to close that gap. And the difference, one of the differences to our approach is that we understand that the American people are not fully participating in the prosperity that some are enjoying in our country, not any part of it. We understand the Republicans are indifferent to those who need a raise in the minimum wage, indifferent to those who need an extension of the unemployment benefits, and the list goes on. I don't know if our colleagues want to say anything about trade or the rest.
Next question.
You've been known to give us a likelihood or prediction of things happening in elections. What do you think the likelihood of Democrats taking back the House is?
But that's not what we're here to do. Today, what we're here this weekend is to talk policy. What we are here to do is to hopefully find common ground, to focus on the economy, to create good-paying jobs, and to do so in as bipartisan a way as possible. If the Republicans would support an increase in the minimum wage, we'd be thrilled. We'd rather have that legislative success than an issue in the campaign. So that's not what we're about today, Frank. Thank you. Did you want to say anything about that? Very good. Thank you. Stenny, why don't you answer? Well, I'm going to yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, but are you referencing the Affordable Care Act? Yes. Thank you.
Well, we're very, the Affordable Care Act that we worked very hard to enact, and I've talked to a lot of you who have said, what do you think about the Affordable Care Act? I said, it's going to get better every month. And by the time we get to the summer, people are going to say, boy, this is really helping me, my family, my brother, my sister, my neighbors. I think we have evidence of that in the figures. You mentioned the 3.3 million people, 1.1 million in January alone. Young people, and this is something that all of you have talked about that we know is very important, young people enrolled at an increased rate, ages 18 to 34, rose 65% over last month. So we think that what is happening is what we thought would happen. The American people are seeing the benefits of the Affordable Care Act, of a marketplace where there's competition, where they get good benefits and lower prices and better access. That was the purpose of the Affordable Care Act. We think that is happening, and we think it's going to be a great benefit to the American people, and they will see that in the coming months.
Steny, we may want to emphasize that's 3.4 million out of over 12.5 million.
Yes.
That's just the exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The exchange, yes.
Any other questions? Yes. Mike.
It's safe to say that most of the issues that you're talking about here, the minimum wage and unemployment insurance and all of these things, there's just about zero appetite for those things to come up in the full House. So you've said in the past that you want to pressure in the mold of the Obama bill. But how, is there a specific strategy for doing that? Do you want Obama to do more pressure
Well,
on these issues? Or how are you going to do it? Because polls are on your side, but Boehner has
Well, the American people, as you indicate, the polls are on our side. Everything that we're talking about here is in the 70%. Over 70% of the people think we should have an increase in the minimum wage. Over 70% of the people think we should have comprehensive immigration reform. The list goes on. And I'll use the VAWA example. We said the too hot to handle approach, that the American people, Lincoln, February 12th, public sentiment is everything. As the more the American people know about what can be done here, I think the better off we will be. However, yesterday, we said over and over again, we're not going to support an increase in the debt ceiling unless it is clean. We are not negotiating the full faith and credit of the United States of America. It took months, but yesterday they finally conceded that at least the Speaker recognized the harm that would happen to our economy if we didn't proceed and we got a clean. So I don't, we're not going away on these issues. And we think there are not, well, we passed a minimum wage in the first 100 hours when we had the majority in 2007, January. President Bush signed the bill. So this is not a partisan issue. Extending unemployment benefits has been a bipartisan initiative all along. So what we are suggesting are not partisan issues. They are areas where we have had bipartisanship in the past. And again, we believe that the fair thing to do for the American people, understanding their challenges. Now, the minimum wage is not just for minimum wage earners. It lifts the floor for everyone. So that's why people beyond those long way, making much more than the minimum wage, understand that it's good for them. Not only does it lift the floor, it injects demand into the economy, and then creates jobs in that way as well. So it's a stimulus. My colleagues, anyone want to add to that?
I would just add to it, surely we're not done. It's the middle of February.
We're 6 weeks into, we've been in session 5 weeks and we're done.
The notion or idea that, because the debt ceiling was lifted, all work is done for the rest of the year, I don't think the American people buy that. They can't. There's just too much that needs to be done. There are too many Americans who are suffering right now. I just mentioned 1.8 million who are looking for work and can't find it. They need help and relief. We talked about people who are earning not enough to even a fast food chain store to really take care of their families, and they're looking for an increase in minimum wage. The President has addressed that to some degree, but the Congress needs to do more. The President asked us today, he asked the Republicans and the Democrats to pass a minimum wage increase for the American worker. So there are things we do need to do, and there is an agenda and a vision that we have to help move the country forward. We want to work with our Republican colleagues to make that happen, but they have to meet us a little bit more than halfway in making that happen here in the House of Representatives.
Let me also add, if I may. Mike, I don't think anything that we've discussed here doesn't have a majority in the House of Representatives. We're not talking about putting up bills that don't have a chance in heaven to get passed. We're talking about measures that not only have the vast majority of Americans supporting these policies, the majority of members in the House of Representatives would vote for these. And so what we're simply asking for is a chance to have a vote on these measures. And I think most Americans probably would be astonished to know that it's not that Congress can't get its work done. It's that there is a concerted effort on the part of the majority, our Republican colleagues, to prevent us from putting up obstacles from letting us vote on these measures. We're not insisting that our Republican colleagues join us in doing what Americans want us to do, in increasing the minimum wage, in providing unemployment insurance for Americans who've lost their job through no fault of their own, or providing equal pay for equal work for women in this country. We're simply saying to our Republican colleagues, let us vote on it. And if the majority exists, excellent. But don't blockade progress in the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is the people's house where we get things done. It should not be the graveyard for good ideas.
Just to emphasize this, because we're not having a theoretical conversation in our caucus meeting. We're talking about very specific actions that Congress can take now. So I think we want to emphasize two things. Number one, these are ideas and pieces of legislation that are ready to go. They could be acted on today. As Javier said, if we had a vote and could start changing people's lives for the better tomorrow, right? We have a minimum wage bill. It's been introduced to increase the wage to $10.10. We have a bipartisan Senate immigration bill. We have legislation introduced to make sure that women get equal pay for equal work. We have legislation introduced to make sure that you can earn sick leave so you can take care of a family who's in trouble, family members in trouble, and not have to lose your pay. These are all concrete actions that could be taken immediately if the Speaker of the House would let us have a vote. That's our preference. If he doesn't let us have a vote, we're going to make it clear that within 100 hours of a new Congress, where we had a majority, we will do these specific things that will have immediate impact in people's lives. And I think that that's important that the public recognize that these are concrete, practical steps that can be taken, not just some theoretical partisan dispute.
Any last questions? Last question.
Mr. Hoyer, yesterday you said you shared some concerns expressed by the Congressional Black Caucus on the lack of diversity of judicial appointments coming from the White House. I was wondering if you could expand on that and let us know what kind of appointment you'd like to see moving forward.
Well, what I said was that that I was in agreement with the Congressional Black Caucus, who has said that we need diversity on our bench, and that the problem in the United States Senate was with deferring to each senator in each state. If they did not support diversity, we wouldn't get diversity, and that they wanted that addressed. And I said I agreed with them on that issue. As a matter of fact, I had an opportunity to talk briefly with Mr. Crone, Senator Reed's Chief of Staff, who asked me about my sentiment, and I said that. Let me defer, however, to Jim Clyburn of the Congressional Black Caucus, who is our assistant leader, because he's been involved in those discussions, and have him comment.
Well, yes, I have been involved in those discussions. I think that what our concerns are, if you were to look at the list of possible judges who have not been acted on, about 13 of them are African Americans. And we believe that these are people who come with sterling credentials, but because of this process, the blue slip process that we have, too many senators from various states are refusing to return the blue slip, and therefore these people are just hanging out in limbo. And so we have asked that these senators take into account the fact that these people, some of them have been out there for 2 years waiting on some action, and because they will not allow their names to move forward, we cannot get them voted on. They will get, as we've said about legislation, these people will be approved if they were allowed to have a vote. We think it's just blatantly unfair for us to have a process that will not allow the full Senate to vote on these nominations. And I thank everybody who expressed concerns about this, because this is something that we think is very, very important to the overall structure of America.
Can you name
Names of what?
senators who have not?
I can, but I won't.
Not here right now.
Thank you all. We'll be in touch probably tomorrow.
If I may just say that there are a lot of people out in the cold, literally and figuratively, because of the unemployment insurance and raising the minimum wage. We don't want the Republicans to be indifferent to them. So far, that looks the way they are. Let's hope they prove us wrong. But I want to thank all of you for coming out in the cold to be with us here, and we hope we can stay in close touch in the next 48 hours or so, so you can see how excited we are about our coming together. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.